Hey, beautiful souls. Welcome back to Soul Podcasting, your go-to podcast for soulful strategies to help you amplify your voice, grow your brand authority, and build legacy through podcasting. I'm your host, Demetria Zinga, podcast coach and founder of the Soul Podcasting Collective, which is a boutique agency where we help purpose-driven entrepreneurs and CEOs to create podcasts that are not just content, but a strategic brand asset. And if you've ever felt like podcasting is just another thing to do, or you're stuck wondering how your episodes fit into your bigger business goals, today's episode is for you. We're diving deep into why podcasting is not just content, it's a powerful brand asset that deserves a seat at your leadership table. I'm bringing this to you with over 20 years of podcasting experience, having launched and grown multiple shows aligned with evolving brands, from my early days of Publish a Podcast to Godcast News and the Christian Women's Business Radio, to my more recent Her Business Elevated podcast and Mompreneurs and Heals podcast, where we empowered entrepreneurial mamas, all the way to the birth of this brand, which is Soul Podcasting Podcast. And each show wasn't just about producing episodes, it was a strategic tool to build trust, position authority, and connect deeply with my audience. So if you want to stop spinning your wheels and start owning your podcast as a core driver of your brand, this one's for you. Before we jump into the main part of the show, I want to quickly remind you that if you're in launch mode, or maybe you've already launched but feel like your podcast could use a refresh, don't miss grabbing my Launch Confidently podcasting checklist. It's designed from years of coaching clients to help you get all your ducks in a row, from the tech setup to messaging, so you can just launch with clarity and confidence. It's straightforward, it's practical, and it's going to save you headaches down the road. So you're going to find that link waiting for you in the show notes. Also, did you catch my recent episode, which is 53, with Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting? I want to hear from you. What part resonates the most with you? And what are your insights that you're going to put into action? I'd love for you to drop your thoughts, reflections, or questions in the comments or DM me at Soul Podcasting on Instagram, and let's keep that conversation going. You can also leave replies to me on my YouTube channel. So I'm leaving all these links in the show notes because I would love to have this be an interactive and engaging community. So feel free to reach out to me anywhere that you see a video on YouTube or Instagram or any of my socials, LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out. I love the interaction. All right, so let's take a moment. I want you to lean into this, okay? It's your creative CEO time. I know that I'm talking to CEOs here. I know that I'm talking to those of you who are not just launching a podcast for the sake of it, but because you have a vision, you have a goal, right? So that's why I speak to you the way I do, because I'm passionate about helping you to tap into your creative energy. So that's why I'm going to be setting the mood on almost every one of my episodes, asking you to find your favorite spot. Maybe grab a drink you love and just relax. This episode isn't about hustle. It's about strategy, soul, and stepping into your role as the visionary leader of your brand. So let the vibe settle in. You're about to get intentional about podcasting in a way that's aligned, authentic, and powerful. Let's get into it. Podcasting is often misunderstood as just content. You'll hear folks say, just put out some episodes, show up consistently. And you know what? Yes, consistency matters, but here's the deal. If podcasting lives only as content, it's an underutilized asset. I want you to start thinking of your podcast as brand DNA in audio form. And I'm going to share a little bit of my journey. So when I started Christian Homeschool Moms podcast, this is in 2012, that podcast was probably about 4 or 5 podcasts later after my very first one, which was in 2005. And by 2012, I had been through a couple of different shows already, understood kind of the tools of the trade and what I was doing. But At this point, it was all about passion for me. The podcast was more than just education content for my audience. It was a lifeline for a community that was navigating faith and homeschooling challenges. So this podcast positioned me as a trusted resource or a mentor and even an advocate, because all of these things deeply tied to that brand's mission. And then a little bit later on down the road, I started what I called initially Web Success Strategies podcast, which turned into the Mompreneurs and Heels podcast that I rebranded after I wrote my book called Mompreneurs and Heels, a guide to passionate, purposeful blogging. So I wanted that branding to tie in together, and so therefore the name change. And this was about blending entrepreneurship and motherhood. It was something very niche, very specific to me. This podcast was a way to showcase real stories and struggles and the wins of mompreneurs, positioning the brand as a go-to space for empowerment and practical advice for moms. It wasn't just episodes. Once again, it was a platform to build a tribe. So fast forward to today with Soul Podcasting. I also run Her Business Elevated. But with Soul Podcasting, I'm not just offering podcast production and strategy services. It's what I do. It's part of what I do. But I'm also building a movement around soulful storytelling and brand influence. My podcast reflects that vision, I hope, on every single episode. I love inviting CEOs and creators to see their voice as a vehicle for impact. So what does this all mean for you? Here are a couple of reasons that I believe your podcast should be a strategic brand asset. So let's dig a little bit deeper into why your podcast isn't just content. So podcasting builds authority and thought leadership. We live in a world saturated with noise, social media, blogs, videos everywhere, right? But podcasting lets you cut through the clutter because it demands a unique level of commitment from both you and your listeners. So when you consistently show up in your listeners' ears, you build what I like to call intimate authority. This isn't surface level expertise that you claim on Instagram or the title you give yourself, right? But it's earned trust over time as people hear your voice, your values, your expertise. They unfold in authentic conversations or even in your solo deep dives. So when you do this with strategy, your podcast positions you as a thought leader. Not just in your niche, but in your audience's hearts and minds. This translates into greater brand influence, like speaking invitations or collaborations and opportunities that text posts alone just can't unlock, right? If you're just posting something to Instagram, it's not the same as being part of your audience's life through a podcast. So you're not just another content creator, you've become a trusted voice that your community turns to. And that kind of positioning really pays off in business growth and legacy, which is a key word on this podcast. I love that word, legacy. Now, podcasting also anchors your content ecosystem. So your podcast should be a part of, if not the central thing, should be, I believe, the central hub of your content strategy. Now, that might be your blog. For some of you, that might be some other really meaty piece of content that is your central thing. It may not be your podcast. Your podcast may be a spoke of that wheel, so to speak, but it's a major piece of content, in my opinion, besides a video or a blog post. I think that your audios are huge. And so you don't want it to be a standalone channel because each episode is a rich well of content that can fuel your entire marketing machine. So from one episode, you can create blog posts or newsletter articles that really deepen your message. Again, we all know about how we can grab those easy social media snippets and audiograms from your podcast episodes, especially once we turn them into YouTube videos or Instagram reels that reach the eyes and ears of new subscribers or people that we want to introduce to our work. YouTube is really great for that, by the way, because again, YouTube is owned by Google. So we want to be seen or want to have a presence on YouTube somehow. And then those transcriptions, right? We can turn them into show notes. We can optimize them for SEO and attract some organic traffic that way. So I think that this multi-use content approach saves time, it saves energy, and instead of reinventing the wheel, you repurpose your podcast intelligently. And this means you work smarter and not harder, and your brand stays consistent across all of your channels. Because podcasts allow long form storytelling, you have the freedom really to unpack your ideas in a way that short form content never can. And then you slice and dice that deep dive into these bite-sized content for wider distribution. Another reason why podcasting is a brand asset and not just content is that it creates a deep emotional connection. There's absolutely nothing like hearing a human voice to build that genuine connection, right? To hear someone speak into your world, into your life through your audio. Podcasting literally lets your audience into your world through tone, inflection, pauses, laughter, and even vulnerability. And unlike text, like on a blog post, for example, which can often feel a little bit cold or impersonal, your voice conveys that emotion that you have in the moment, the authenticity, and even the small nuances of how you speak and how you present yourself. And all these things that actually build loyalty and deepen relationships. So this emotional connection turns your casual listener into raving fans or clients or collaborators because they feel like they know you. And people do business with those that they know, like, and trust, which is something we talked about in our last episode with Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting. So if you haven't checked that out yet, go ahead and listen to it. It's episode 53. So again, if you want to build a tribe and you're not just concerned about a follower count, I believe that podcasting is the bridge to true community. It's like a direct line into your audience's lives. Next, podcast SEO and longevity matter. So one of the biggest myths about podcasting is that it's hard to find or it's only for niche audiences. But the reality is that podcasts have incredible SEO power. So episodes don't disappear after 24 hours like social posts, like some social posts do, right? Like your stories on Instagram. But instead, they actually live on your platform. You get indexed by Google and you can show up in search results months or years later. This means that your content keeps working for you long after you hit publish. New listeners discover your brand continuously, which fuels ongoing growth and your lead generation. If you optimize your show notes and your titles with your SEO in mind, you can create a discovery engine that drives fresh traffic and builds your authority organically, which is why I love organic marketing. It's long term and it takes a while to do it. But once you implement those SEO strategies, those organic marketing strategies at the end of the year, at the end of 3 years, 5 years, you will be so amazed at how much leverage your podcast ecosystem has. And this includes your blogs and everything that you do online surrounding your brand. This type of longevity is a huge reason that podcasting is an investment and not a cost. Now, your podcast is intellectual property. Just in case you didn't know, these are unique creations that represent your ideas, your values, and your expertise, and they're captured forever in audio form. So long as they are available to the public, you've captured this for your audience. So this is your intellectual property. This IP can be transformed and monetized in countless ways. You can transform your intellectual property to turn your best episodes into courses or workshops. You can package your interviews and stories into a book or a keynote speech. You can create new shows or spin-offs based on your content pillars. There's so much you can do to repackage and repurpose all of your property. Your podcast isn't just a marketing tool, it's the foundation of a legacy you can build over years. It preserves your voice and your message for future generations and clients to access. When they have a question, you can refer them to episode 51 or something like that, right? So whenever someone says, hey, I don't really understand what we're doing here and why we're doing this, you can refer them to an episode you've done earlier and say, this is why I've explained it fully in episode 51. And then you can treat your podcast as a strategic asset for long-term growth to help future clients, to be a marketing piece for you as well. It's an asset rather than disposable content, right? You open doors to multiple income streams, influence, and lasting impact beyond your day-to-day hustle. So keep in mind that everything you do with your podcast matters. It really, truly matters. And if you're a CEO or founder, this means your podcast isn't just content. And I say that in air quotes. It's a brand pillar that deserves your respect and strategy. So we're going to do a quick pause for a moment. If you're feeling inspired and you're ready to take your podcast to the next level, or let's just say you're ready to start your podcast with clarity. If you haven't started yet, I want to remind you once more about my Launch Confidently podcasting checklist. This checklist is everything you need to get started without overwhelm. Those of you who are podcasters already probably don't need to launch confidently because you've already done that, but you might know someone who needs to launch confidently. And I highly recommend that you share this tool with them. From technical setup to messaging clarity and launch strategy, I've crafted this from working with dozens of clients who have gone on to launch successful shows because they laid a strong foundation. So I'm going to leave that link in the show notes for you to grab it now, or for a friend who is looking to launch their show really soon. All right, time for some podcasting news, which I promise you guys in future episodes that we'll be doing more of this. So I came across a fascinating article on Pod News, which is pretty much where I get most of my podcasting news from. And I believe it's worth sharing. And this is about how the podcasting world is gearing up for its next big leap, which is local podcasting. Now, this has been going on for quite some time, but I think that there's more focus on this now. We're talking about hyper local content, like within your neighborhood or community. Creators are starting to dig deep into city or community specific stories, voices, culture, things going on within your community. And we do have an example of someone who's doing that, of a local podcaster who's doing that within her community. On my very first interview here on Soul Podcasting, I interviewed Angela Ross, and she is doing exactly that in LA with her podcast, which is SoCal Voices. So what I believe this means is that there are massive opportunities for podcasters out there who want to build influence at a neighborhood level. Plus, local sponsors are paying attention, right? So if your brand has a local or community focus, or you want to serve your city or your region, this could be your moment to step in and lead with authenticity. Create that show to support your neighborhood and community. And who knows, maybe you're just the voice that your community is waiting for. All right, my friend, thank you so much for spending this creative CEO time with me today. If this episode shifted your thinking about podcasting in any way, and you want to start using your podcast as a strategic asset and not just content, then let's connect. At the Soul Podcasting Collective, we specialize in coaching, editing, launching, and repurposing with a soulful strategic approach that honors your unique brand voice. So whether you're just getting started or you're ready to scale, I'd love to support you in owning your podcast journey with clarity and confidence. And you can visit soulpodcasting.com or DM me on Instagram at soulpodcasting. And until next time, my friends, stay aligned, stay soulful, and keep amplifying that powerful voice of yours. Happy podcasting.